The bitter February wind cut through the Pine Ridge wilderness like a knife, carrying with it the desperate voices of search teams that had been combing these treacherous Colorado mountains for over 2 weeks. What started as a routine winter camping trip for 5 teenagers from Boulder High School had become the largest search and rescue operation the state had seen in decades. The missing students, Jake Patterson, 17, Ashley Chen, 16, Devin Williams, 18, Maria Gonzalez, 17, and Tyler Brooks, 16, had vanished without a trace on February 3rd during what was supposed to be a supervised outdoor education program. The temperature had plummeted to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit the night they disappeared, and with each passing day, hope seemed to freeze along with the mountain streams. Search Coordinator Captain Rebecca Stone stood at the base camp, her breath forming clouds as she studied the topographical maps spread across the hood of her truck. 18 days. In these conditions, survival seemed impossible. Before we continue this incredible story of survival against all odds, we'd love to have you join our community of adventure seekers. Please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from around the world who share our passion for real survival stories. The teenagers had been part of a winter wilderness program designed to teach outdoor survival skills. But when a sudden blizzard struck the region, their instructor, Mark Dalton, became separated from the group during what should have been a simple navigation exercise. Dalton was found the next morning, suffering from severe hypothermia and frostbite, barely conscious and repeating the same words over and over. The cave. They found the cave. Search teams had been deployed immediately, but the storm that separated the group had also erased any tracks or trail markers. Helicopters couldn't fly in the whiteout conditions, and ground teams struggled against snowdrifts that reached 8 feet in some areas. The parents of the missing teenagers had set up a vigil at the local community center, their faces etched with the kind of desperate hope that only comes when everything you love hangs in the balance. Dr. Amanda Foster, a wilderness survival expert brought in to assist the rescue operation, explained the grim reality to the gathered media. In these temperatures, without proper shelter and supplies, hypothermia can set in within hours. The human body simply cannot maintain core temperature in this environment without significant protection. Her words hung heavy in the mountain air, but she also noted something that gave the teams a sliver of hope. These kids were well trained. They knew basic survival principles. If they found adequate shelter, if they had the right mindset, there's still a chance. The search area encompassed over 40 square miles of some of the most rugged terrain in the Rocky Mountains. Cliffs dropped hundreds of feet into frozen valleys, and hidden crevasses could swallow a person whole. Professional rescue teams from 3 states had volunteered their time, working in shifts around the clock despite conditions that pushed both man and machine to their limits. Every cave, every overhang, every possible shelter had been systematically searched and marked on the ever-growing map of eliminated possibilities. On day 10, the first piece of evidence emerged. A torn piece of Ashley's distinctive red jacket was found caught on a thorn bush nearly 3 miles from where the group was last seen. The discovery redirected the search efforts to a new quadrant, an area known locally as Dead Man's Ridge, for its reputation of claiming unprepared hikers. The terrain here was even more treacherous, with loose rock faces and hidden ice sheets that could send rescuers tumbling into the abyss below. Jake Patterson's father, Robert, a retired Army sergeant, had refused to leave the base camp since the search began. His military training told him to prepare for the worst, but his father's heart wouldn't let him give up. "My boy's tough," he told anyone who would listen. "They all are. These kids grew up hiking these mountains. If anyone could survive out there, it's them." His wife, Linda, clutched a thermos of coffee that had long since gone cold. her eyes never leaving the tree line, where she hoped to see 5 familiar figures emerge at any moment. The local community had rallied in ways that restored faith in human nature. Restaurants donated hot meals for the search teams, hardware stores provided equipment at cost, and volunteers arrived daily to help in whatever way they could. Even the weather seemed to be offering a brief reprieve. The temperature had risen to a balmy 20 degrees, and the snowfall had stopped for 3 consecutive days, giving helicopters their first real opportunity to join the search from above. The Mountain View Diner stayed open 24 hours a day, serving free coffee and sandwiches to anyone involved in the search. Local high school students organized supply drives, collecting sleeping bags, hand warmers, and emergency rations for the rescue teams. Maria Gonzalez's mother, Carmen, a nurse at Denver General, had taken leave from work to coordinate the family communications. She maintained detailed logs of every search grid completed, every lead investigated, every hope raised and dashed. Her medical background helped her understand the physiological challenges her daughter and friends were facing, but it also made the statistics more terrifying. She knew that after 18 days in these conditions, they were no longer searching for survivors. They were searching for closure. Carmen had set up a communication center in the community center basement, complete with maps, radio equipment, and a coffee station that never ran empty. Other parents took turns manning the phones, updating social media, and coordinating with local news outlets who had picked up the story. Devon Williams's grandmother, Eleanor, a woman in her 70s who had raised Devon after his parents died in a car accident, surprised everyone with her resilience. She insisted on joining the search teams despite her age, claiming her knowledge of the mountain trails from her youth could be valuable. "I've been hiking these mountains since before you were born," she told Captain Stone, with steel in her voice. "Devon knows these stories, these trails. He's heard them all from me. That boy won't give up easy." Eleanor's presence became a source of inspiration for the younger volunteers, her unwavering faith that her grandson would find a way to survive infectious to everyone around her. Tyler Brooks's parents, David and Rachel, owned a local outdoor gear shop and had provided much of the equipment being used in the search free of charge. David found himself torn between wanting to join the search parties and needing to stay at the shop to continue supplying the operation. Rachel had taken charge of organizing the volunteer schedules, her natural leadership skills and intimate knowledge of the local outdoor community, making her indispensable to the coordination effort. Their shop became an unofficial second headquarters for the rescue operation, with detailed trail maps covering every wall and radio chatter filling the air at all hours. Ashley's parents, Dr. Michael and Susan Chen, both physicians at Denver General, had initially wanted to join the medical support team, but were gently discouraged by Dr. Foster, who explained that their emotional investment could compromise their professional judgment. Instead, they focused on ensuring that the medical teams had everything they needed, using their connections at the hospital to secure specialized cold-weather medical equipment and consulting with hypothermia specialists from as far away as Alaska and Finland. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Local resident and amateur drone operator Kevin Liu had been conducting his own search missions, using his high-end thermal imaging drone to cover areas that ground teams couldn't safely access. Kevin was a software engineer who had moved to Colorado 5 years earlier specifically for the outdoor lifestyle. His technical background and passion for drone photography had given him skills that proved invaluable in the search effort. He had been flying search patterns methodically, documenting everything he found and sharing the data with the official search teams. On the morning of day 18, Kevin was conducting what he privately thought might be his last search mission. The official teams were beginning to shift from rescue to recovery mode, and the weather forecast showed another major storm system moving in within the next 48 hours. His drone picked up what appeared to be a heat signature in an area that had been marked as searched and cleared. The reading was faint, almost imperceptible, coming from what appeared to be solid rock face on the northern slope of Eagle's Peak. Kevin initially thought his equipment was malfunctioning. He landed the drone, checked all the connections, recalibrated the thermal sensors, and launched again. The signature was still there. Multiple heat sources clustered together in a location that should have been empty rock. He tried approaching from different angles, adjusting his camera settings, even switching to a backup thermal camera. Every test confirmed the same thing. There were heat signatures consistent with human presence in an area that ground teams had declared clear. Captain Stone initially dismissed the reading as equipment error, or possibly wildlife, but Kevin insisted there was something different about this signature. "I've been flying drones in these mountains for 5 years," he argued, his voice tight with excitement. "I know what a deer looks like on thermal. I know what rocks look like when they've been warming in the sun. This is different. This is consistent with human heat signatures, and there are multiple sources clustered together." Kevin's persistence was born from more than just technical confidence. He had been following the story of the missing teenagers closely, and something about their situation reminded him of his own younger sister, who was about the same age as the missing kids. The location Kevin had identified was nearly impossible to reach on foot. The slope was too steep for safe climbing, and the rock face appeared solid from every angle ground teams had previously examined. The area had been marked as searched because rescue teams had rappelled down from above and examined the rock face with binoculars, but the angle of approach had made it impossible to see the cave opening that was hidden behind a natural rock curtain formed by centuries of erosion and ice movement. Helicopter pilot Marcus Rivera, a 20-year veteran of mountain rescues who had flown rescue missions from Alaska to Arizona, agreed to attempt a closer aerial reconnaissance. Rivera was known for his ability to fly in conditions that grounded other pilots, and his helicopter had been modified specifically for high-altitude rescue work. As his helicopter approached the coordinates Kevin provided, fighting against wind currents that threatened to slam him into the mountain face, something caught his eye. A small opening in the rock face, barely visible and partially concealed by overhanging ice formations that had been invisible from any ground-based observation point. "Base camp, this is Eagle 1. Rivera's voice crackled over the radio, cutting through the static and background noise that had become the soundtrack of 18 days of desperate searching. "I've got visual on what appears to be a cave opening at the coordinates provided. It's well hidden, maybe 4 feet wide, about 15 feet up from the base of the cliff. I can see what looks like smoke or steam coming from the opening." The words sent electricity through every person monitoring the radio frequency. After 18 days of false leads, dead ends, and crushing disappointments, they finally had something real. Rivera maneuvered his helicopter closer, the rotor wash sending clouds of snow spiraling away from the mountain face. Through his binoculars, he could see more clearly into the shadowed opening. There was definitely activity inside, not just the wisp of smoke he had first noticed, but actual movement. "Base camp, I can confirm signs of life. There's definitely human activity in that cave. I can see what appears to be a maintained fire, and I'm getting glimpses of movement inside." His voice was steady, professional, but those listening could hear the underlying excitement that comes when impossible hope transforms into tangible reality. The rescue operation that followed required precision and expertise that pushed everyone involved to their absolute limits. The cave opening was positioned in such a way that helicopter extraction was impossible. The overhang above prevented any aircraft from getting close enough, and the downdraft from the rotors could potentially collapse loose rock onto anyone inside the cave. A technical rescue team would have to rappel down from above, access the cave, assess the situation, and potentially carry out 5 teenagers who might be in various states of medical distress. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, The team's medical coordinator, who had flown in from Denver's National Jewish Health Hospital, began preparing for multiple scenarios. Her experience treating high-altitude medical emergencies had taught her that after 18 days in these conditions, the teenagers could be suffering from severe dehydration, malnutrition, hypothermia, frostbite, altitude sickness, and potentially more serious complications like kidney damage from dehydration or cardiac irregularities from prolonged exposure to extreme cold. Her medical team prepared warming blankets, IV fluids, cardiac monitors, oxygen supplies, and a full range of emergency medications, while the technical rescue specialists planned their dangerous descent. The approach to the cave required a complex rigging system anchored to trees nearly 100 feet above the opening. The rescue team had to account for loose rock, ice formations that could give way under the weight of rescuers and equipment, and wind conditions that were strong enough to slam a person into the rock face. Rescue specialist Tom Bradley, a man whose calm demeanor had seen him through dozens of technical rescues from the Grand Canyon to Mount McKinley, would be the first to make contact. Bradley had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission, being the first to enter an unknown cave system where the structural integrity was questionable and the condition of any survivors was completely unknown. As Bradley descended the rope system, fighting against wind gusts that threatened to slam him into the rock face, he could see more clearly into the cave opening. There was definitely activity inside, movement that was too organized to be random, and what appeared to be a carefully maintained fire. The smoke he could see wasn't the chaotic pattern of a wildfire or the steady stream of a natural gas vent, but the controlled burn of people who knew what they were doing. Bradley's years of experience had taught him to read these signs, and everything he was seeing suggested that whoever was in that cave had been there for a while and had established some kind of organized survival system. "I've got eyes on multiple subjects," Bradley reported as he reached the cave entrance, his voice echoing slightly as it bounced off the rock walls. "I can see at least 3 individuals, and they appear to be responsive and mobile." The cheers from base camp could be heard echoing off the mountain walls, a sound of pure relief and joy that had been building for 18 long days. Parents who had barely slept, rescue workers who had pushed themselves beyond exhaustion, and volunteers who had given everything they had to this search finally had confirmation that their efforts had not been in vain. Bradley secured himself at the cave mouth and called inside, his voice gentle but clear. "Hello! This is Mountain Rescue! Can you hear me?" The response that came back was weak, but unmistakably human and unmistakably alive. "We're here! We're all here! Please help us!" It was Jake Patterson's voice, hoarse and strained, but filled with an emotion that brought tears to the eyes of hardened rescue professionals who had seen everything the mountains could throw at human beings. After 18 days of uncertainty, 5 families were about to be reunited with their children. What Bradley discovered inside that cave would later be described as one of the most remarkable examples of teenage resourcefulness and survival instinct ever documented in Colorado rescue history. The cave extended much deeper into the mountain than anyone had suspected, forming a natural shelter system that had protected the 5 teenagers from the worst of the weather. The opening that Rivera had spotted from his helicopter was actually just the entrance to a complex cave system that included multiple chambers, natural ventilation, and access to fresh water. The teenagers had managed to create and maintain a fire using wood they dragged in during the brief periods when weather permitted them to venture outside. More importantly, they had found a source of fresh water from an underground spring that flowed through the back of the cave system. The spring had been the key to their survival. Without access to clean drinking water, they would have died within days, regardless of how well they managed everything else. Ashley Chen, drawing on knowledge from a wilderness first aid course she had taken the previous summer, had appointed herself as the group's medical officer. She had treated various injuries the group had sustained during their initial fall into the cave system, improvised bandages from torn clothing, and established a system for monitoring everyone's health. Her most critical intervention had been recognizing the early signs of hypothermia in Tyler during their second night, and implementing warming procedures that had almost certainly saved his life. Devon Williams, the oldest and strongest of the group, had taken charge of gathering firewood and securing their shelter. His job was the most dangerous, venturing out during brief weather windows to collect dead wood and drag it back to the cave. He had developed a system using torn strips of clothing as rope to lower himself down to areas where wind had deposited branches and other combustible material. His efforts had kept their fire going continuously for 16 days, a feat that impressed even the most experienced wilderness survival experts who later analyzed their situation. Tyler Brooks had demonstrated mathematical precision in rationing their limited food supplies. When they first entered the cave, the group had pooled their resources: 3 energy bars, 2 bags of trail mix, half a package of beef jerky, and some emergency chocolate that Ashley had been carrying. Tyler had calculated their caloric needs, factored in their activity levels and the energy required to maintain body temperature in the cold, and created a rationing system that made their food last 12 days. Far longer than should have been possible. His system had been so effective that they still had emergency reserves when they were found. Maria Gonzalez had taken on perhaps the most crucial role of all, maintaining group morale and psychological health. Her natural optimism and leadership skills had kept everyone focused on survival rather than despair. She had instituted a daily routine that included morning planning sessions, afternoon story sharing, and evening discussions about what they would do when they were rescued. Her insistence that they would be rescued, not if but when, had provided the psychological anchor that prevented panic and despair from taking hold during their darkest moments. Jake Patterson had organized the overall survival strategy and served as the group's decision-maker when consensus couldn't be reached. His leadership had been tested multiple times, particularly during their first week when Tyler had wanted to leave the cave and try to hike out on his own. Jake's calm reasoning and ability to think through complex scenarios had convinced Tyler to stay, a decision that had almost certainly saved his life. Jake had also been responsible for their signaling efforts, creating smoke signals during the day and arranging their fire to be visible from above during the night. The teenagers were thin, dirty, and exhausted, but they were alive and mentally intact. They had survived 18 days in conditions that had killed experienced mountaineers, and they had done it through teamwork, intelligence, and sheer determination. As Bradley began the delicate process of evacuating them one by one, using a complex pulley system to raise each teenager to the top of the cliff, he couldn't help but admire their resilience and the bonds they had forged during their ordeal. The evacuation process took nearly 6 hours to complete. Each teenager had to be individually assessed, stabilized if necessary, and then carefully extracted using rescue harnesses and rope systems. The first to be brought up was Maria, who, despite her own exhaustion and hypothermia, insisted on helping coordinate the rescue of her friends from her position at the top of the cliff. Her immediate concern wasn't for her own condition, but for making sure the rescuers understood the layout of the cave and the specific medical issues each of her friends was dealing with. Ashley came up second, and her first words to Dr. Walsh were a detailed medical report on each of her friends' conditions. Despite having no formal medical training beyond a basic first aid course, her observations were precise and valuable. She reported that Devon had a possible hairline fracture in his left wrist, Tyler was showing signs of mild frostbite on his toes, and Jake had been dealing with severe dehydration for the past 3 days, despite their access to fresh water. Devon's evacuation proved the most challenging due to his size and the shoulder injury he had sustained during their initial fall into the cave system. The rescue team had to modify their pulley system and use additional rope anchors to safely bring him to the surface. Despite his pain, Devon's first concern was whether his grandmother Eleanor was still at base camp. When he learned that she had been there every day since the search began, he broke down in tears, the first time any of the rescuers had seen him show anything but stoic determination. Tyler's evacuation went smoothly, despite his weakened condition. The combination of hypothermia and malnutrition had left him barely able to walk, but his spirits remained high. As he was lifted from the cave, he kept apologizing to the rescuers for causing so much trouble, a response that both amazed and concerned the psychological support team who were monitoring the teenager's mental states. Jake came up last, refusing to leave until he was absolutely certain all his friends were safe. His leadership instincts remained strong, even as exhaustion and relief overwhelmed him. As his feet touched solid ground at the top of the cliff, Jake immediately asked to speak to his parents by radio. His conversation with his father, Robert, was brief but emotional. "Dad, we made it. We all made it. We took care of each other just like you taught me." The reunion scenes between parents and children created some of the most emotionally powerful moments anyone present had ever witnessed. 18 days of fear, hope, and desperate searching culminated in embraces that seemed to last forever. Carmen Gonzalez collapsed to her knees when she saw Maria, her professional composure as a nurse completely overwhelmed by relief and joy. Eleanor Williams, Devon's grandmother, surprised everyone by giving him a lecture about worrying her before dissolving into tears and holding him like she would never let him go again. Dr. Walsh's medical assessment revealed that while all 5 teenagers were suffering from dehydration, malnutrition, and mild hypothermia, none of their conditions were life-threatening with proper treatment. Ashley had some frostbite on her toes that would require specialized care, but was unlikely to cause permanent damage. Devon's wrist injury turned out to be a severe sprain rather than a fracture. Tyler's hypothermia responded well to gradual rewarming procedures. Maria had lost nearly 15 pounds, but was otherwise in remarkably good condition. Jake was the most severely dehydrated, requiring immediate IV fluid replacement, but even his condition stabilized quickly once treatment began. Perhaps more remarkably, their mental state was extraordinarily healthy. Rather than being traumatized by their ordeal, they seemed proud of what they had accomplished and grateful for the experience. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a trauma psychologist brought in to evaluate the teenagers, noted that their strong group dynamic and successful survival experience had actually built their confidence and resilience rather than creating lasting psychological damage. The story of their survival began to emerge during extensive debriefing sessions at Denver General Hospital. On that fateful February 3rd, when the blizzard separated them from their instructor, Mark Dalton, the 5 had made the critical decision to seek shelter rather than continue trying to navigate in whiteout conditions. This decision, made collectively within the first hour of being separated from their instructor, had been the key to their survival. They had followed basic survival priorities: shelter first, then water, then food, then signaling for rescue. They had stumbled quite literally into the cave when a snow shelf gave way beneath their feet as they sought shelter behind what they thought was a large boulder. What could have been a disaster became their salvation when they discovered that the opening led to an extensive cave system with natural ventilation, protection from the elements, and access to fresh water. The fall had been terrifying, a 15-foot drop onto a rocky cave floor, but no one had been seriously injured, and they quickly realized they had found something that could save their lives. Inside the cave, they quickly assessed their resources and their situation. Jake's Boy Scout training had taught him the basics of survival priorities, and Ashley's first aid knowledge helped them treat minor injuries and establish health monitoring procedures. Devon's experience as a high school athlete gave him the physical strength needed for the most demanding tasks, while Tyler's academic strengths helped them solve logistical problems like food rationing and fire management. Maria's natural leadership abilities kept everyone focused and optimistic. They had instituted a democratic decision-making process, with each member of the group having equal say in their survival strategies. Major decisions, like whether to attempt to leave the cave to seek rescue, were made by group consensus. Daily decisions about work assignments, food distribution, and fire maintenance were handled by whoever had the most relevant expertise. This system had prevented the kind of conflicts and power struggles that often doom survival situations when multiple people are involved. They had created detailed work schedules that ensured all critical tasks were covered while also providing structure to their days. Devon was responsible for firewood collection and cave security. Ashley handled medical issues and water management. Tyler managed food rationing and inventory. Maria maintained group morale and led their daily planning meetings. Jake coordinated overall strategy and served as their primary decision-maker when quick choices were needed. Their fire management had been particularly impressive. They had maintained a continuous fire for 16 days, using techniques that demonstrated both knowledge and innovation. They had learned to bank their fire at night, using techniques Devon remembered from camping with his grandmother, covering the coals with a precise mixture of ash and small wood pieces that would keep them alive but not consume their limited fuel supply too quickly. The water source they had discovered turned out to be part of an underground stream system that connected to several other caves in the mountain. The water was not only clean and safe to drink, but it remained liquid even when outside temperatures dropped well below freezing because it was flowing through rock that was insulated from the surface temperature variations. This had been their greatest stroke of luck. Without access to clean water, all their other survival skills would have been meaningless. Their food management had been a masterclass in resource allocation under extreme constraints. Tyler had calculated that their pooled food supplies would last exactly 4 days at normal consumption levels. By reducing their daily caloric intake to just above starvation levels and supplementing with pine needle tea for vitamin C, they had stretched their supplies to last 12 days. They had even managed to save a small emergency reserve by the time they were rescued. Perhaps most impressively, they had maintained hope and psychological resilience throughout their ordeal. Maria had instituted daily storytelling sessions where each person shared memories of home, plans for the future, and positive experiences. These sessions had served multiple purposes. They kept everyone's minds occupied, reinforced their connections to the outside world, and maintained the belief that they would eventually be rescued. The cave system that saved their lives was later explored more thoroughly by geological survey teams from the Colorado School of Mines. It turned out to be part of an extensive network that had never been properly mapped or documented. The underground spring that provided their fresh water was fed by snowmelt that filtered through miles of limestone rock, creating some of the purest water geologists had ever tested. The cave had likely been used as shelter by Ute hunting parties centuries earlier, evidenced by ancient fire rings and primitive tool markings found in the deeper chambers. Kevin Liu, the drone operator whose persistence had led to their discovery, became a local hero and was awarded the state's highest civilian honor for his role in the rescue. His refusal to accept that the area had been thoroughly searched had literally saved 5 lives. The thermal signature his drone detected had been so faint it was almost within the equipment's margin of error, but his experience and intuition told him it was worth investigating. The teenagers returned to Boulder High School 8 weeks later, after completing their medical recovery and psychological evaluation. Rather than being set back by their ordeal, all five reported feeling more confident, more appreciative of their families and friends, and more aware of their own capabilities. Ashley went on to study emergency medicine at the University of Colorado, inspired by her experience treating injuries in the cave. Devon became a certified wilderness guide and mountain rescue volunteer. Tyler studied meteorology and climatology, fascinated by the weather patterns that had both endangered and saved them. Maria earned her psychology degree and now works with trauma survivors. Jake joined the army and later became a search and rescue coordinator. The rescue operation cost over $3 million and involved more than 400 volunteers and professionals from 5 states. As Captain Stone noted in her final report, these 5 teenagers didn't just survive, they created a functioning society in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Their story will inspire search and rescue operations and survival training programs for generations to come. The cave where they sheltered has since been properly marked and equipped with emergency supplies, creating a potential life-saving refuge for future hikers. A bronze plaque near the entrance reads, "In February 2025, 5 teenagers survived here for 18 days through courage, intelligence, and unbreakable teamwork." Their story reminds us that the human spirit can achieve the extraordinary when faced with impossible odds. The families established the 5 Peaks Foundation, providing wilderness survival training to schools across Colorado and beyond. The program emphasizes not just technical skills, but the psychological and leadership qualities that proved crucial during those 18 days. Jake, Ashley, Devon, Maria, and Tyler regularly speak at these sessions, sharing their story and inspiring others never to give up hope, no matter how impossible the situation seems. Their rescue remains the longest successful teenage survival story in Colorado history, and a testament to preparation, teamwork, and the unbreakable human will to survive.